What happens when centuries of military doctrine, formidable firepower, and overwhelming numbers all converge on a single city block, only to be neutralized by concrete, darkness, and human ingenuity? What happens when the very foundations of warfare shatter against the stones of a single stronghold? Let us step into the autumn of 2025. The world's attention is riveted to Ukraine's embattled east, where Russian forces, emboldened by recent hard-fought gains, stand poised to seize their next prize, the massive industrial heartland at the edge of Sloviansk. This is no ordinary battlefield. Beneath the battered ruins and tangled steel, a secret waits, a vast labyrinth, engineered in the fevered days of the Cold War to survive the unthinkable, a nuclear exchange. Today, it has become the last redoubt for the city's defenders, a subterranean fortress of steel, concrete, and stone, riddled with hidden tunnels, bunkers, and ambush nests. Why does this matter? Because the fate of a campaign, perhaps even the war itself, hangs upon this underworld. Above ground, every weapon of modern war has already been unleashed. Artillery rains steel day and night. Tanks crawl through shattered streets, their armor scarred and blackened. Assault teams surge towards entryways, only to be repulsed, leaving behind nothing but casualties, broken machines, and bitter frustration. Each Russian attack is met with a ghostly counter. The defenders, masters of their domain, vanish into darkness at the first sign of danger. They strike from unexpected passages, inflict losses, then melt away before a counterstrike can even form. Time and again, the cycle repeats. Strike, vanish, reappear. The Russian advance stalls at the underground gates, and the offensive threatens to unravel. To truly understand the stakes and the lessons that will echo far beyond this war, we must explore the anatomy of this underground struggle, where brute force means nothing, and survival is a matter of adaptation, cunning, and the courage to shatter the old rules. The siege of Sloviansk's industrial underworld is more than a tactical deadlock. It is a crucible in which a new breed of warfare is being forged. Commanders on both sides know that clinging to yesterday's doctrines spells certain defeat. Only innovation and flexibility can break this impasse, or else the entire campaign may collapse. This is not just another battlefield. It is a concrete labyrinth, purpose-built for the end of the world. The sprawling factories and warehouses of western Sloviansk conceal a relic of Soviet ambition. A web of tunnels stretching for tens of kilometers, buried nearly 30 meters below the surface. Designed to outlast nuclear fire, this fortress factory was built with reinforced arteries, corridors, bunkers, and supply rooms that remain immune to almost any destruction above. Inside, as many as 3,000 of Ukraine's most determined defenders hold fast. Their supplies, food, water, ammunition, have been stockpiled for months. Every meter of darkness has been mapped and weaponized. They move unseen, strike from the shadows, and thrive where most would break. Above ground, Russian forces unleash everything in their arsenal. Artillery storms batter the surface relentlessly. Even the enormous, precision-guided bombs dropped by warplanes, some weighing over 1.5 tons, barely scratch the underground nerve centers. Tanks and armored columns, once the spearhead of battlefield dominance, find themselves stymied in the twisted wreckage of factory yards and cratered roads. Every attempt to breach the underground is met by a counterattack from hidden passageways, a ghostly war in which every corner, every corridor, could be a fatal trap. Throughout history, armies have faced the challenge of fortresses designed to defy siege. During the Second World War, the Germans turned the French Maginot Line into a symbol of static defense, only to bypass it with maneuver and innovation. In the Second Chechen War, Russian troops found themselves bogged down in Grozny's ruined cityscape, where every basement and sewer offered defenders a chance to strike and disappear. And in 2022, the world watched as the Azovstal plant in Mariupol became a symbol of resistance, a maze of tunnels and bunkers that held out for weeks against overwhelming force. Yet, Sloviansk's industrial underworld is different. Here, the defenders shape their prison into a weapon. They lure attackers into a slow, grinding war, where the old rules, overwhelming firepower, encirclement, direct assault, count for little. The concrete catacombs erase the advantages of modern armies, forcing commanders to confront a new reality. The laws of combat must be rewritten, or the cost in blood and reputation will be catastrophic. For the Russian High Command, the stakes rise with every failure. Each assault that ends in retreat drains morale, wastes irreplaceable men and machines, and hands the defenders a global symbol of defiance. The longer the stalemate persists, the greater the risk that the offensive will lose momentum, and with it, the strategic initiative. Now, with classic tactics shattered and losses spiraling, the command faces a stark reality. New tactics and specialists will be required. The coming days will demand not just courage, but transformation, the willingness to abandon cherished doctrines and embrace the unknown. When reason insists that a fortress is unassailable, the truly dangerous are those who refuse to listen. They are the ones who rewrite the rules of war. The Russian command begins, as always, with brute force. Waves of armored vehicles and infantry surge forward, heavy artillery paving the way. The first 2 days bring devastation. Entire columns are reduced to smoking wrecks. Scores of soldiers fall in exposed kill zones. Each new attack only deepens the losses and lengthens the casualty lists. Artillery and warplanes hammer the industrial zone. Buildings are pounded into twisted steel and choking dust. Yet, beneath the ruins, the defenders are untouched, their command posts and supply lines hidden deep underground. No matter how massive the attack, the true heart of resistance remains invisible, unbroken. Russian infantry storm shattered holes and skeletal factories, desperate for a foothold. But the Ukrainians are the true masters of the tunnels. Fighters emerge from darkness and rubble, striking from unexpected shafts and collapsing basements. Every corridor becomes a kill box, every fallback a trap. No advance goes unpunished. By the third day, Russian commanders see a grim pattern. Orthodox tactics are not just failing, they are accelerating disaster. Losses climb, morale plummets, and the clock on the entire operation begins to run out. The risk is now strategic, not merely a failed assault, but the collapse of reputations and the very purpose of the offensive. Inside a smoke-choked command tent, exhausted officers brief senior staff. Maps bleed crimson, casualty reports pile high. Silence reigns until a battle-scarred colonel speaks. His proposal is heresy. If the enemy controls the depths, then the fight must go underground. He invokes the harsh lessons of Azovstal and Solidar, where tunnels turn the tide of battle. The order is given. Assemble Russia's rarest asset, elite mole teams, veterans skilled in subterranean warfare and psychological combat. Their task: infiltrate the labyrinth, fracture defender morale, and weaponize the enemy's own domain against them. With that decision, the doctrine shifts. Brute force yields to deception, intelligence, and surgical raids. The age of blunt assault is over. Now begins the era of asymmetric, specialist-led urban siege warfare. But even the most audacious plans carry unforeseen dangers. As the first mole teams prepare to descend, a new kind of battle is about to begin, one fought in utter darkness, where every step could be a fatal mistake. Victory will not be claimed above ground. It will be forged in darkness, silence, and the fear that comes when the enemy is everywhere and nowhere at once. The thunder of artillery ceases. Russian command halts all open assaults as nearly 200 elite mole operators gather, each chosen for their nerve, skill, and uncanny ability to vanish. This is not a force made for open confrontation, but for the quiet unraveling of an enemy from deep within. Before any boots touch concrete, the fortress is exposed by three-dimensional mapping. Ground-penetrating radar sweeps the area, searching for secret voids. Seismic sensors catch even the faintest tremor. Intelligence pours in from defectors and local engineers, each recalling the hidden arteries of the old Soviet tunnels. Inch by inch, the defender's domain is laid bare. Outfitted with miniature drones, advanced life support gear, and digital navigation systems, the mole teams prepare for a silent siege. Each carries supplies for several days, breathing filtered air and moving unseen, invisible to heat sensors and electronic surveillance. Technology transforms them into ghosts within a concrete labyrinth. 6 autonomous strike groups splinter off, each slipping into the depths through forgotten sewer lines, rusted vents, and neglected maintenance shafts. No team takes a main entrance. Every entry is a wager, balancing ingenuity against sudden death. First contact is a crucible of nerves. Silent takedowns are met with tripwire mines and motion sensors, forcing absolute focus. Every footstep is a negotiation with the unknown. One miscalculation could doom the entire mission. Over time, a new terror seeps through the tunnels. Once familiar paths become haunted by unseen adversaries. Whispers of silent kills and vanished patrols spread, eroding morale. Even inside their stronghold, defenders begin to mistrust the darkness itself. Sabotage strikes in waves. Power stations fail. Supply caches erupt in sudden flame. Radios devolve into meaningless static. Small breakdowns ripple outward, multiplying chaos. Trust in the defenses fractures. Panic replaces discipline. Operation Hydra is the linchpin. Synchronized strikes by small teams, paralyzing the garrison more effectively than any frontal attack. Fragmented, isolated, and hunted, the defenders now face a relentless chaos from within. Yet one question looms. Can these shadow tactics reach the command center itself? Or will the battered defenders rally for a last, desperate stand? The next hours will determine not only the fate of the stronghold, but the future of siege warfare itself. All eyes turn to the final, silent contest in the heart of the underground maze. When the center collapses, the fortress is reduced to dust, scattered and powerless. Beneath the battered surface, the plan is set in motion. 3 elite teams synchronize their assault on the enemy's subterranean nerve center, attacking from 3 distinct vectors. One force storms the front, another slips through a concealed flank, while the third, the so-called moles, descends silently through a vertical shaft, turning the defenders' own tunnel network against them. For nearly half an hour, chaos reigns. Flashes of gunfire, muffled blasts, and ricocheting shouts bounce through dripping corridors. The defenders' careful preparations shatter as speed, shock, and surgical violence upend any hope of a coordinated defense. By the end, the enemy's leaders are neutralized. Panic spreads. Bereft of orders and hope, the remaining defenders face a stark choice. One after another they surrender, demoralized, exhausted, and forced to accept that their fortress was never as invincible as they once believed. What months of artillery and bloody assaults failed to achieve is accomplished in under a week. Precision, flexibility, and calculated risk-taking rewrite the fate of Sloviansk'S industrial citadel. The message is clear. Victory hinges not on brute force, but on the courage to abandon old patterns and embrace innovation. Analysts dissect every detail. They find that doctrine was discarded. Instead, real-time intelligence, hand-picked experts, advanced reconnaissance, and decentralized swarm tactics allowed for constant adaptation. Initiative was rewarded at every level, and the enemy's static routines became their undoing. From this crucible, a new doctrine emerges. Siege and tunnel warfare, once acts of desperation, now become a discipline, studied, drilled, and taught to elite units across the nation. The impact is profound. Russian forces take a critical hub, tilt the psychological balance of the conflict, and demonstrate that adaptability, not just firepower, defines modern victory. The warning is unmistakable. Failure to adapt means repeating fatal mistakes, but mastery of these lessons could turn the tide in any future battle. What practical insights from this fight might guide anyone, soldier or civilian, when facing their own impossible obstacles? Let us break down the core principles that emerged from Sloviansk and see how they can be adapted far beyond the battlefield. The lessons are universal, and the stakes are real. First, the value of intelligence and preparation. The successful infiltration of Sloviansk'S labyrinth was not an accident. It began with exhaustive mapping, ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, and human intelligence. In everyday life, this translates to preparation and research. Consider the example of a startup entering a crowded market. Instead of charging in blindly, the founders spend months learning from failed competitors, mapping out customer pain points, and identifying the unique strengths of their own team. When the moment comes, they move not with brute force, but with precision, targeting the exact gaps others missed. Second, adaptability. The Russian command's willingness to abandon failed doctrine and embrace specialist mole teams was the pivot point. Throughout history, the armies that adapt survive and thrive. In the Second World War, the Allies learned from early defeats and changed tactics, developing mobile tank units, integrating air support, and breaking codes. In business, adaptability means pivoting when the market shifts. Kodak, once the king of film, failed to adapt to digital photography and collapsed, while Apple shifted from computers to consumer electronics and conquered new worlds. Third, decentralized initiative. The mole teams operated in small, autonomous groups. Each was empowered to make decisions on the spot, reacting to new threats or opportunities without waiting for orders from above. This echoes the German concept of Auftragstaktik, mission command, where junior officers are trusted to pursue objectives using their own judgment. In modern organizations, this culture of trust and autonomy enables rapid problem-solving. Companies like Google and SpaceX encourage team members to take ownership of challenges, leading to breakthrough innovations far faster than rigid hierarchies allow. Fourth, psychological warfare. The siege succeeded not just by killing or capturing defenders, but by sowing fear, confusion, and doubt. Sabotage, misinformation, and the unseen presence of enemy agents broke morale from within. In negotiation, sports, or politics, the psychological element, the ability to unsettle the opposition, to appear everywhere and nowhere, is often the difference between victory and defeat. Think of Bobby Fischer's chess matches, where he would unsettle opponents with unexpected openings, psychological feints, and relentless pressure until mistakes were inevitable. Fifth, the courage to innovate. The defenders of Sloviansk were not beaten by overwhelming numbers, but by opponents willing to try the untried. This courage to innovate is the most precious commodity in any contest. It is evident in the story of the Apollo program, where problems like the Apollo 13 crisis were solved not by following procedure, but by creative thinking under pressure. NASA engineers built a makeshift carbon dioxide filter from spare parts, saving the crew, because they refused to be bound by the manual. Sixth, recognizing when to persist and when to change course. Many failures in history have come from stubbornly repeating the same approach. During the First World War, generals sent wave after wave of men into machine gun fire at the Somme and Verdun, achieving little but massive loss. In contrast, the breakthrough at Cambrai in 1917 came when tanks were used in coordinated, innovative fashion, changing the nature of land warfare. Seventh, the importance of logistics and sustainability. The defenders' months-long stockpiles allowed them to resist initial assaults, but sabotage of supply caches and power plants turned endurance into vulnerability. In any long struggle, whether personal, professional, or military, sustaining your resources and defending your lines of support is just as crucial as any attack. Eighth, learning from failure. Every setback in the Sloviansk siege became a lesson, rapidly processed by both sides. The Russians did not simply double down on failed assaults. Instead, they shifted gears, reorganized, and tried new approaches. In life, treating mistakes as data, not disasters, is the engine of progress. Edison's thousands of light bulb failures were not defeats, but steps toward the solution that changed the world. Ninth, the power of narrative and morale. The symbolic value of the Sloviansk underworld was immense. For defenders, it was a rallying point. For attackers, it was a test of legitimacy. In every field, from politics to sports, the stories we tell ourselves shape what is possible. Winston Churchill's speeches in 1940 did not change the facts on the ground, but they transformed the will of a nation to fight on. 10th, the imperative of ethical clarity. Even as tactics grow more complex and technology more advanced, the question of right and wrong remains. The world watches every action. The siege of Sloviansk was as much a media event as a military one. Both sides knew that their choices would outlast the battle itself, shaping reputations and alliances for years to come. Each of these lessons, born in the darkness of Sloviansk's tunnels, has applications far beyond war. Perhaps you are facing a seemingly impossible challenge, a business rival, a personal crisis, a daunting academic goal. The core principles remain the same. Prepare relentlessly, adapt without pride or hesitation, empower your teams, leverage psychological insight, dare to innovate, know when to pivot, protect your resources, learn from mistakes, harness the power of narrative, and hold fast to your ethical compass. Imagine a scenario. A small tech startup faces a global giant in the marketplace. The giant has the resources, the brand, and the established customer base. The startup, outnumbered and outgunned, could be crushed by direct competition. But by focusing on a specialized niche, using guerrilla marketing tactics, and rapidly iterating their product in response to real-time feedback, they can outmaneuver the slow-moving behemoth, much like the mole teams that infiltrated the fortress from unexpected angles. Or consider a student preparing for an exam against overwhelming odds, perhaps lacking resources or time. Instead of cramming blindly, they focus on the highest impact topics, form study groups, and seek out old tests to understand patterns. They turn the challenge into a contest of wits, not just brute effort. In personal relationships too, those who listen, adapt, and communicate creatively often resolve conflicts that seem insurmountable. There are historical precedents everywhere. In the American Civil War, General Grant's siege of Vicksburg was won not by frontal assault, but by cutting supply lines and using the Mississippi River to isolate defenders. In the Second World War, the British Special Air Service pioneered deep raids behind enemy lines, disabling airfields and supply depots with small, agile teams, changing the face of special operations forever. Practical steps for anyone facing impossible odds. Assess the problem in 3 dimensions, not just one. Map every angle, every hidden variable. In the siege, this meant radar and seismic mapping. In life, it could mean seeking advice from mentors, reading case studies, or running simulations. Build diverse teams. The mole operators were not just infantry. They included engineers, sappers, drone pilots, and psychologists. In business, diversity of skills breeds creative solutions. Embrace technology, but do not rely on it blindly. The Russians used the latest sensors and drones, but always paired them with human judgment and improvisation. Prepare for setbacks. Every plan will meet resistance. The first assaults on Sloviansk failed. Only after repeated adaptation did success come. Measure success by outcomes, not effort. Months of bombardment accomplished little, but a week of targeted, flexible operations changed everything. Communicate clearly and often. In the tunnels, lost radio contact meant disaster. In organizations, clear communication prevents confusion and aligns teams. Respect the psychological dimension. The defenders' morale was ultimately broken by fear, uncertainty, and isolation, not just by physical defeat. Always consider the ethical and long-term consequences. Short-term victory is worthless if it breeds lasting resentment or destroys credibility. And finally, never underestimate the power of imagination. Every innovation, every leap forward, begins with the willingness to ask, what if? What if we try something no one else has dared? What if the rules can be changed? In the end, it is not the mightiest who reshape destiny, but the sharpest minds, the few who dare to adapt beyond the safety of old rules. Against the underground labyrinth beneath Sloviansk, brute force was useless. Outdated tactics, no matter how fiercely applied, only fed a grim cycle of failure. No barrage of artillery, no swelling ranks of soldiers could unlock that steel-clad maze. Instead, it was intelligence, relentless, imaginative, and unorthodox, that finally shifted the balance. Those who clung to tradition found themselves ensnared, watching the best of their teams and technology sacrificed for a hollow victory. Losses mounted, morale crumbled, and the promise of triumph faded to a bitter stalemate. But those willing to abandon dogma, who built agile teams, exploited real-time reconnaissance, and turned the fight into a contest of wits, cracked the fortress where others had broken. The greatest risk was never enemy fire, but the refusal to outthink the problem. History is merciless to those who confuse stubbornness with strength. It rewards the ones who question every assumption, who spot the hidden passage, who transform the enemy's strongest point into a fatal flaw. Survival and true victory belong to those who evolve. It is not brute force, but intelligence willing to break the mold that decides the future. Cling to tradition and risk irrelevance, or worse, disaster. Adapt, and you not only survive, but become the new standard others must chase. Tomorrow's wars, whether waged in shadowed tunnels or distant domains, will always test our courage to rethink everything we know. The only real question is, when the moment comes, will you dare to adapt before it is too late?